Is in the last 10
so
years,
difficult to make
I
that
was
decision.
reading an average book a week for about
Wow.
3 years, like from 2000. Thank you. From about 2000, like, because after university, I basically stopped learning or reading. I was like, I'm done, right? I worked really hard. I did really well in my GCSEs, really well in my A levels, really well in my degree.
And then you're like, I'm done.
And I'm done. And I went traveling. I'm like, I read a few books when I was traveling, but then I didn't really read it throughout my 20s, like really. And then I started to read again when I got into this whole world.
Yeah.
And was reading on average a book a week because I was traveling to work and stuff. So like 50 books a year for the first sort of 3-4 years. And so some of the books may have come out of that. But now I read a lot less because I'm not traveling as much and I'm not as militant with my knowledge, but I do a lot more podcasts.
How do you read usually? Do you listen audiobooks or
Well,
do you read physically?
Often physically. So when I was going to work, I had a 9-minute commute on the train.
Oh, okay.
But the whole commute was 30 minutes. So when I was walking to and from the station and doing the escalators, I would have an audio book.
Which is perfect.
And then when I was on the tube, I'd have the Kindle. And I found the Kindle much easier because it's a lot easier to slip in and out of the pocket, get to the pace, rather than a physical book.
Oh, yeah. Me, Kindle, the same thing.
Yeah.
And you also, for me, someone whose English is third language, I would always, it's so easy to mark the words or to look them up. Yeah. And then afterwards, you're done with the book, you have the list of the words you were looking up and you can...
But some books I will buy physically, especially if I want them later for reference or if I plan to read them at home. Some books I buy both physical and audio, like I did that with Ben Greenfield's book Boundless. I did the audio version, which was 24 hours long, but I wanted the book as well. The book I'm reading at the moment is on the Kindle, but I've got other books coming which are physical, so a whole mix. And I'm listening to actually a good book you might quite like, The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin.
So rings the bell.
So he's a friend of Tim Forrest's, and he's the subject matter of this movie called Searching for Bobby Fischer.
Right.
And he was like a chess prodigy, but then he left that and then he became like some Tai Chi push hands champion and a Brazilian black belt jiu-jitsu, and it's all about his way of learning. So but yeah, so the two books that I suggest, what were the two books? One was Warrior Pose. What was the other one that
The Greatest Salesman.
Oh yeah. Yes, that's it. The Greatest Salesman in the World, which is actually a book I rarely recommend to people, but it has probably been one of the most transformational books.
So Greatest Salesman, I got it on audiobook straight away. So I listened it 3 times.
Okay, so you're doing...
So I was prepping for this, obviously, so we can talk about it. But the Warrior Pause, I got to 40%. I was reading in my Kindle. I got to 40% and I just didn't have time to read it. But it's so good. I love it. I got to the point where, spoiler alert for those who haven't read it, but when he actually got his surgery and he's back to Hong Kong. Right. So the story is about, well, how about you? Just give a breakdown.
So Warrior Pose, ironically enough, actually, I've got it in my bag in the car because I lent it to my brother-in-law and he's had it in Brighton for like 2 years. So it's a true story about a guy who used to work for either NBC or CNN or some kind of news...
Huge one, like the
big
biggest
channel,
one.
yeah. And he was in the first Gulf War in the 90s doing stuff. And anyway, long story short, he ends up with throat cancer. He also breaks his back whilst trying to hang curtains or something.
So he broke his back first, and that cancer came later.
Okay, yeah.
So he broke his back because...
But then he got addicted to painkillers.
It was a storm, and there was a little window open, and he reached for it and just very stupidly.
And by breaking the back, you break the bone in the back and not the connection, so he could like technically still walk around and stuff.
Yeah.
But then create lots of pain, and then he developed throat cancer and... It ended up becoming addicted to drugs and like prescription drugs. That is,
here's the book.
Painkillers. Yeah,
that's the one.
That's the title. Yeah. And ended up having an intervention going. And even though I'm explaining this, it's not really like spoiling the story so much because it's just such a readable book.
It's really good.
It's so addictive, and
because I struggle to read after hours. I usually actually read to make me sleep I fall asleep much easier. But like yesterday, I was still 2:00 and I was just still reading.
Yeah, I found that I read it in like 2 or 3 days, and I would read
really
that
good.
rather than watch TV, which for me means. So this was one of my 6 unput downable books, which I did a podcast on, which is
before you go into like the main essence and like what I want you instead of like telling about the book, just tell like what kind of resonate to you. But before we get in there, like so the first 30%, 40% of the book is about him going from these really rough, crazy areas, war zones, and like from Kazakhstan and all these like. And then some of the stuff what he's seen, and they are very graphic about like telling. And one of the craziest one was when he realized he sees on the ground a caterpillar, and he wants to pick it up, and he picks it up. It's a person's lip with a moustache on it.
Oh God.
And I was like,
I can't even remember that bit.
Yeah, well, I just freshly read. And then the other one was crazy when in this refugee camp, there's this woman with a dead child in her hands. She's walking around like with this glossy face, and she's just like all malnourished and all that kind of stuff. It's like some of them, and they just explain it so vividly. Then the last one was about Thailand, about the sex trafficking and how like 10 years old girls are like being
crazy.
It's insane. And from very beginning, and also the story how he got into being a news reporter was insane.
Oh yeah,
he just randomly got into this place, and there's like, are you here for interview?
Some random like out the way.
Insane. And he was like, I'm gonna go tomorrow to Canada, and all of a sudden he's already there. Sorry, so that's and it's just very.
It's such a great book. I mean, for me, I think what is it? It's really shown, because I've been into yoga since about 2008. Well, 2006. The reason I got into yoga actually, incidentally, is because when I worked at the stock exchange, I used to work night shifts, and after night shifts, I would go to the gym, and then I remember one time I would be on the treadmill, and I almost like fell asleep or collapsed on the treadmill, and I was like, I've got to do something other than the gym workout when I finish class. Because I wasn't at that point going straight to bed. I experimented with different shift patterns. So then there was a yoga class at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I started originally getting into yoga that way, but then it was only when I went to Thailand, did a bit of yoga there, then eventually found a decent teacher in London at a gym, and we did like twice a week, 90 minutes. I got really into it. And part of the reason that I was dedicated to getting into it is because I had this neck injury, which still persists a little bit to this day, but you know, it's a compressed disc or something in the neck, and they were like, well, it could be cortisol, could be surgery, could be physio. And so I started doing the physio, and then that 10 session block finished, and I was like, I've got to continue to do something. And so then I was like dedicated every Tuesday and Thursday. I'd leave work at 5:30, 5:35 latest to get to the 6 o'clock class. And again, this comes back to the whole book, The Thought Gym, where you're talking about identities and values and beliefs and all of that.
Right.
I was like, I don't care that I might be seen to be leaving work early at 5:30, which is the time that I'm supposed to leave work, right? And people are staying till 6 or 10 past 6 or whatever. I'm like, this is more important, right?
Yeah.
I know that when I'm 80 or 60 or 70 or 80, whatever, I don't want to be hunched over. I don't want to be all of this when I look at people on the street. So I was like, this is important to me. So that got me started on yoga. And so why I like this book is because and I normally recommend this to people who are kind of new to yoga, thinking about yoga, thinking, is it really for them? You know, or like in my brother-in-law's case, is like quite injured, to give them inspiration about what's possible from this, you know.
And did you read this book after you already done yoga?
Yeah. I only read this like, I think I must have read this about 6 years ago.
Oh, okay. And you've been doing yoga now for how long?
I would say I seriously started doing yoga in 2008, so 13 years.
13 years.
But I started like before that, but really like a regular practice.
Yeah. And since we start talking about this subject, please tell me now the journey you have now. So you teach as well. How long you been teaching yoga?
I've been teaching for about 6 years. So I got my qualification, or my certification, I should say. There's always a difference between certification and qualification.
What is the difference?
I did a video on it. Certification, in my mind, is like you get your certificate, right? You do a course. Here you go. You can now teach it. Qualified means, do I feel qualified to actually teach yoga, right? And I might, and like some people, they get certified after certification after, and they still don't feel because they don't feel confident enough, whatever. So for me, what qualifies me to say speak on stage about health and well-being is not because now I have a master's in health and well-being, which I do have. That just certifies me I've got a master's certificate, a master's degree. What qualifies me is, you know, my experience, the hundreds or thousands of books, the thousands of hours, the 2-3 books I've written, you know, the results of my clients. That qualifies me to talk about what I'm talking about. right? A certification is just a certificate, right? So, but I got my certification in 2015. Just because I wasn't going to teach, but I just thought, deepen my practice is the cliche, just to learn a little bit more. So I'd been doing yoga for about 7 years before I did my certification. A lot of people, they do yoga for like 6 months and they go, oh, I want to do my teacher training. I'm like, I don't know if that's correct.
And is a specific type of yoga you're doing as well?
Well, what I was qualified, what I got certified in was this thing called Budokan, which is like a fusion of vinyasa flow, which is like a flowing form of yoga, animal moves, martial art influences. It's really quite cool.
Animal moves are very, very trendy and popular.
Well, yeah, my teacher would not like that statement because he was doing it like 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, but obviously it's because of, what was the guy's name?
Ido Portal.
Yeah, so he became just like the guy who does the salt on the meat, there's certain trendy things and all of a sudden everyone's looking at it.
Yeah, but, I mean, so I guess my teacher would have probably issues with Ido Portal because he's probably like quite, taking it to another level, I guess. But yeah, so it's got that, but I don't teach that so much these days because of a knee injury I've got at the moment, and actually it's quite intense on the knees. I worked out. So I teach mainly a vinyasa flow, which is a movement-focused yoga, quite a strong class often. I'm teaching later tonight, so I only do that a couple of times a week, so it's just a kind of a part-time thing just because I enjoy it, and, but it's not like a career, as it were.
Yoga, and we talked about this before, definitely something would like to look into. And I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the moment, and so many BJJ practitioners, they say like it's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
But one of the things I probably could say I'm different from other BJJ guys, that I actually stretch all the time.
You do a lot. You're
I
very
stretch
flexible.
like I can do full splits and all that. One definitely what is quite stiff is my shoulders. Like when people put their hands behind their back and can actually clinch them. On one side I'm this far, on the other side I'm like this far.
Yeah, so, I can't do that currently. I have in the past been able to do it, but right now.
But I think it also can be to do something with the muscle mass. If you have bigger muscle mass on your back, that's where it's just.
Yeah, there's loads of factors in that. I mean, the one thing I would say with yoga for anyone looking to go and start it is don't go to one class and go, no, I don't like it. It's like going to watch one movie and saying, oh, I don't like movies.
Well, it's like dating girls. You date one you don't like, and then that's it. I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. So go to lots of different teachers, lots of different styles, and lots of different studios.
100%.
Right, and then you can, and then give it time, and then you're not going to get the same. You will get good results quite quickly, but it's not like running, where within 6 weeks of running, suddenly your whole body's changed. Right? Yoga doesn't kind of work like that. But even if you're kind of good at stretching, we see lots of ex-dancers, ex-gymnasts. Yoga in the West is a physical practice, I guess, but yoga's much more than that historically.
100%.
And even in the West, where you do the physical practice, what is going to transpire is more about the mental side of things that you'll get the benefit from, which will permeate through to the physical and other aspects. So yeah, definitely give it a go. Even though you're flexible, that means you're going to be great. You're going to have no issues with that so much, but there'll be something else.
I think for me was the biggest problem was the time, because also being in Bali, going from BJJ, then I want to do some weights, then I want to do surfing, then I want to do all those things.
You spend your whole day doing exercise, which is, I did 3.5 hours of yoga yesterday, for example. I was on holiday.
Eventually. Okay, so this is about Warrior Pause, this book, so people definitely check it out.